Walk into any tackle shop and you'll see spinning rods sitting on the rack at every price point imaginable. There's the $40 rod next to the $120 rod, and somewhere in the back corner, the $250 specialty rod with a warranty card tucked inside the tube. And here's what stands out when you actually compare them closely. The jump from $40 to $80 often buys you a real improvement. But the jump from $100 to $250, for most anglers fishing on weekends and occasional trips, that gap is largely name recognition and retail positioning, not a meaningful difference in how the rod performs on the water. Hit subscribe before we get into it. If you want honest breakdowns on fishing gear without someone trying to sell you something, you're in the right place. I'm Jerry Davis, and I've spent enough time around tackle shops, fishing forums, guide reports, and gear specs to know that price and performance do not always move in the same direction, especially when it comes to spinning rods. There are rods in the $60 to $120 range that cast smoothly, transmit bites clearly, and hold up through serious use. And the only thing separating them from the premium shelf is the name on the blank and the retail strategy behind it. Today, we're going through 7 spinning rods that feel expensive without actually costing premium money. I'm not here to tell you cheap rods are always great, or that premium rods are always a waste. What I'm going to tell you is where the real value sits, which features actually matter for real fishing, and which rods are drawing consistent praise from anglers who picked them up expecting to be disappointed. By the end, you'll have a much clearer picture of what you're actually buying before you ever put a hand on the cork or foam grip. Let's start with one you've probably seen on every rod rack in the country, the Ugly Stik Carbon. The original Ugly Stik built its reputation on decades of nearly indestructible fiberglass composite construction. That clear, solid glass tip section became almost iconic, but a lot of anglers write the brand off entirely because the original is heavy, slow, and not exactly what you'd call sensitive. The carbon version changes that conversation. The blank is a graphite and fiberglass composite that is noticeably lighter than the original and more responsive, while still keeping a built-in forgiveness that pure graphite rods can't match. Guides are stainless with aluminum oxide inserts. Nothing exotic, but clean and functional for freshwater use. Anglers who've put the carbon through a full season consistently report that it holds up better than most rods at the same price, and the sensitivity is more than adequate for finesse presentations in freshwater. Where it falls short is when you're pushing toward very light line weights or highly technical deep water presentations, like a drop shot in 30 feet. For that, you want a faster taper and higher grade graphite. But for an angler throwing spinners, light jigs, or small crankbaits on medium light power, the Ugly Stik Carbon is a very honest rod at a very honest price. It doesn't pretend to be something it's not, and that counts for something. Moving up a step, let's talk about the Fenwick HMG. This is a rod that consistently surprises people who pick it up for the first time in a shop. The HMG uses a high modulus graphite blank that is noticeably lighter and stiffer than what you typically get from rods in its price range. The guides on the current version are stainless with zirconia inserts, a real step up from cheaper aluminum oxide options, particularly if you're running braid as a mainline. The cork handle is clean and comfortable and doesn't feel like it was sourced from a floor tile, which is worth mentioning because a lot of mid-priced rods cut corners there first. Now, high modulus graphite does come with a trade-off. The higher the modulus, the more sensitive the rod becomes, but also the more brittle it is under impact. If you drop rods on the dock, lean them against the truck, or share your equipment with kids who are still learning to be careful, a more forgiving composite blank may actually be the smarter long-term choice. But if you take care of your gear and your fishing finesse techniques, light jigs, drop shot, Ned rig, small swim baits, the Fenwick HMG feels like a rod that should cost twice what it does. The action is crisp, the sensitivity is genuine, and the weight in hand is competitive with rods significantly more expensive. Next is the Abu Garcia Vendetta, and this one keeps coming up in conversations about value for a reason worth explaining. The Vendetta is a graphite blank rod built with high-density EVA foam handles and a Fuji reel seat. That last part matters more than it might seem. Fuji reel seats are not a budget component. They're what you expect to find on rods priced at $200 and above. Getting that seat on a mid-price rod is a meaningful detail because it keeps your reel locked in without wobble, reduces vibration interference between the reel and blank, and doesn't loosen up over time the way cheap plastic seats tend to do after a few seasons of regular use. The guides are stainless steel with zirconium inserts, which is again a step above what the price would normally suggest. Where the Vendetta earns its value is in how it balances. It's a light rod that doesn't feel soft or unresponsive. It transmits feedback well, and anglers report that it casts lighter lures more cleanly and accurately than you'd expect. The trade-off is that it's not a heavy cover rod. The graphite construction means it doesn't have the backbone to muscle fish out of thick grass or brush piles, the way a heavier composite power rod would. But for open water bass, walleye, trout, and panfish, on medium to medium light setups, the Vendetta consistently earns its price, and then some. Now let's talk about the Lews Custom Speed Stick. Lews has been producing solid rods for years, and the Custom Speed Stick line represents probably their best value to quality ratio at accessible pricing. The blank uses 30-ton graphite, which gives you good sensitivity without going so far up the modulus scale. That durability becomes a real concern. The guides are Fuji Alkanite, not the top-tier Fuji option, but a definite step above cheap inserts in terms of surface smoothness and long-term performance with braid. The cork grip on the Speed Stick feels better than what you get at the same price from most other manufacturers. What stands out in long-term owner reports is consistency. Anglers who've owned multiple Speed Sticks over several seasons note that the rods hold their action, the blanks stay straight, and there are no unpleasant surprises after heavy use. That kind of reliability is hard to measure on a rack, but matters enormously across a full fishing season. If you're throwing moving baits, spinner baits, shallow crankbaits, medium running jerk baits, the medium-heavy Custom Speed Stick is one of the stronger options in its price category. It loads and releases cleanly on the cast, and the tip has enough life to keep lures running properly through the retrieve rather than killing the action. Here is one that doesn't always get the credit it deserves: the St. Croix Triumph. St. Croix builds premium rods that cost real money, and their reputation is legitimate. But the Triumph sits at the entry point of their lineup at a price that many anglers can actually work into their budget. What you're getting is SCII graphite construction with an integrated polycurve tooling process, which in practical terms means the blank is built with fewer variations in thickness throughout its length, producing a more consistent and predictable action from tip to handle. The guides are hard aluminum oxide, which is serviceable for monofilament and fluorocarbon. If you run heavy braid regularly, it is worth keeping that in mind because harder ceramic inserts would serve you better over time. St. Croix's warranty reputation is well established in the industry. If something breaks under normal use, they stand behind their products in a way that a lot of companies at this price level simply do not. For anglers stepping up from a budget rod who want something built with consistent quality control and real backing from the manufacturer, the Triumph is a hard option to argue against. The limitation is that at the lower end of what St. Croix offers, you will notice the blank and guide differences if you ever pick up an Avid or Legend above it. But compared to offshore competition at the same price, the Triumph holds its ground. The Okuma Celilo is worth mentioning for a specific type of angler, someone chasing trout, panfish, or light tackle bass in rivers, streams, and smaller lakes, where delicate presentations matter. The Celilo is a very light very sensitive graphite rod, built for situations where you need to feel every tap, every current change, and every hesitation in a drifting bait or small jig. Anglers targeting steelhead in clear rivers or trout in technical streams consistently speak highly of this rod because the blank construction allows a level of bite detection that most rods at double the price don't dramatically improve upon for that specific application. The trade-off is exactly what you'd expect. It's a light-duty rod. Don't buy this for heavy jigs, big swim baits, or situations where you need to turn a fish quickly out of heavy cover. The power rating is not a suggestion, but for the angler who fishes ultralight, the Celilo performs well above its price point and carries an established reputation in the light tackle community that goes back years. The last rod on this list is the KastKing Crixus, and I want to be direct about what this rod is and what it is not. The Crixus is a graphite composite spinning rod at a genuinely low price. It does not have premium components. It is not built to compete with the St. Croix or the Fenwick for sensitivity or long-term durability. What it does have is a blank that, based on construction specs and widespread owner reports, transmits adequate feedback for basic freshwater fishing, handles light to medium power applications without falling apart, and casts well enough to be genuinely functional. For a beginning angler who needs a working rod without spending heavily while figuring out which type of fishing actually fits their lifestyle, the Crixus is a reasonable starting point. For an experienced angler running a technical finesse presentation or targeting large fish in demanding conditions, it is not the right tool. The guides are basic. The reel seat is functional but not impressive, and long-term durability is not in the same conversation as anything else on this list. But value is relative, and at its price, the Crixus performs well enough that dismissing it entirely would be unfair to the anglers it actually serves. Now, here's what ties all of this together. Think about how much of your fishing is done close to the bank versus from a boat. Think about whether you're throwing light, finesse lures or heavier moving baits. Think about whether you fish every week or mostly during 2 months per year. Think about how careful you are with equipment and whether you fish freshwater exclusively or move into brackish or saltwater. Those answers determine which rod on this list actually fits you, because a rod that is perfect for one style of fishing is average or even frustrating for another. Spending more than you need to rarely helps you catch more fish. Spending a little more in the right place on components, blank quality, or manufacturer backing can absolutely make a difference over time. Let me know in the comments which of these rods you fished with and whether it held up the way you expected. And if you found a rod not on this list that belongs here, drop the name below, because I'm always interested in what's working for anglers in real conditions. Good fishing gear is not the gear with the highest price or the loudest marketing. It's the gear that fits the way you fish, survives the conditions you put it through, and does its job without creating another problem. These 7 spinning rods do exactly that, at prices that leave money in your pocket for line, terminal tackle, and the fuel to actually get on the water. Hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who's been standing in front of a rod rack without knowing which one to grab. I'm Jerry Davis, and I'll catch you in the next one.